Dear Lord, thank you for this opportunity that I have to get on stage and use the gifts, the abilities that you've given me. Pray that you'd speak through me and you'd open the ears of these students so they can at least get one thing out of this and just bless their day and bless my day and help us to run smoothly. Amen. All right. How many of you guys have ever done something that you know you're not supposed to do, but you did it anyways? Yeah? I'm guilty too. I've done that. Now, how many of you guys have done that and gotten caught? Yeah? All of you? Yeah? All right. Me too. I'm going to tell you guys a story about a time where that happened to me. I knew I wasn't supposed to do it. My friends knew I wasn't supposed to do it. I still did it anyways, and I got caught. So I was probably maybe a couple years older than each of you guys. I was at winter camp. At my winter camp, we were in this cabin. There was a lot of snow. And we decided to play this game. Now, this game, I can't technically tell you what it is. You'll probably later find out in your life. But I can tell you this. We weren't supposed to play it without a leader. And this game had penalties in it. So, we decided to play it without leaders. And it was me and my boys who were hanging out in my cabin, and it was a good time. We're like, there's no leaders around. I mean, it's fine. We won't get out of hand. Little did we know we did. So we started playing this game. And one of my friends, I don't know what his problem was, but every single round, he got multiple penalties. Towards the end, we're like, dude, what's going on? Why can't you get any of this right? And he was racking up penalties after penalties and penalties, and we had to give him consequences for those penalties. And we finally got to this one where we were running out of decisions, but we came up with this one penalty for him. Now, once he got that penalty, he had to get down into his boxers, and he had to go outside in the snow, and he had to lay face down in the snow for 30 seconds. So, we thought it was a great idea. It was fantastic. We were laughing. And so he went out, he did his time for 30 seconds, he came back in, we were laughing. But what we didn't know is when he came in, our pastor came in right after. And so, right there, we were like, oh crap. Oh shoot, what the heck? We're in trouble. And so our pastor yelled at us. Let's just say I never did that again. It was a very poor decision. But this is a story of something that I did, I knew I wasn't supposed to do, and I still did that. And so we're going to be looking at a passage today where there's this king who knew everything, knew what he was supposed to do, knew what happened if he didn't do what he was supposed to do, still did it, and he got punished for it. So if you guys open up to Daniel 5, if you guys weren't here previous weeks, Daniel is about this book where this guy named Daniel gets captured by this king Nebuchadnezzar along with some of his other people, and they're forced to live in Babylon under a nation where they didn't believe in God. And throughout that time, Daniel stayed obedient, and God did some incredible things through his life and just saved him from some incredible tragedies. So we're going to read, starting in verse 1, and then we're going to get to our points. All right. If you guys can follow along. Verse 1, chapter 5, it says this. King Belshazzar gave a great banquet for 1,000 of his nobles and drank wine with them. While Belshazzar was drinking his wine, he gave orders to bring in the gold and silver goblets that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken from the temple of Jerusalem. That was his mistake that he made. So that the kings and his nobles, his wives and concubines might drink from them. So they brought in the gold goblets that had been taken from the temple of God in Jerusalem, and the kings, his nobles, wives, and concubines drank from them. So right there, just a quick heads up, says that he was at a party and that he was drinking wine, and while he was drinking that wine, he was making that decision. So we know by process of elimination that he was probably a little tipsy at the time, probably drunk. And so his decisions, his mind was being swayed a little bit by the alcohol he was consuming. Continuing in verse 4. As they drank the wine, they praised the gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Suddenly the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall, near the lampstand in the royal palace. The king watched the hand as it wrote. His face turned pale, and he was so frightened that his legs became weak and his knees were knocking. The king summoned the enchanters, astrologers, and diviners, and then said to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads the writing and tells me what it means will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around his neck, and will be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom. That's a huge prize. Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writings and tell the king what it meant. So King Belshazzar became even more terrified, and his face grew more pale, and his nobles were baffled. The queen, hearing the voices of the king and the nobles, came into the banquet hall. "May the king live forever," she said. "Don't be ashamed. Don't look so pale. There's a man in your kingdom that has the spirit of the holy gods in him. In the time of your father, he was found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom like that of the gods. Your father, King Nebuchadnezzar, appointed him chief of magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. He did this because Daniel, whom the king called Belshazzar, different name than the king right now, was found to have a keen mind and knowledge and understanding, and also the ability to interpret dreams, explain riddles, solve difficult problems. Call for Daniel, and he will tell you what that writing means." And so right here, I just want to stop right here and focus on the queen for a second. It said the queen, hearing the voices of the king and nobles, came into the banquet hall. So right there, we can tell that she wasn't at the party. So when she wasn't at the party, she probably wasn't drinking, and so she was in her right mind, and she was sober. And so I want to ask you guys a question. Do you guys have friends like these, where you may be doing something stupid, something not smart, and you have a friend like the queen is able to come in and pull you aside and be, "Hey, I think you should knock this off. I don't think you guys should be doing this right now." I know I have a lot of those friends in my life, and they've saved me from many, many, many decisions that could have gone very poorly. So I encourage you guys to look for those friends or develop those relationships with those friends, because they can save you a lot of trouble in life. And notice how she didn't do it. She did it out of respect. So "May the king live forever." That's a sign of respect to the king. So she did it out of respect. Do you guys have friends like those? They're able to help you in those dark times. Continuing in verse 13. So Daniel was brought before the king, and the king said to him, "Are you Daniel, one of the exiles my father, the king, brought from Judah? I have heard that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that you have insight, intelligence, and outstanding wisdom." The wise men and enchanters were brought before him to read this writing and tell me what it means, but they could not explain it. "Now I have heard that you are able to give interpretations, solve difficult problems. If you can read this writing and tell me what it means, you'll be clothed in purple, gold chain placed around your neck, and you'll be made third highest ruler in the kingdom." Also want to stop right here. Daniel has this incredible reputation. Over the years, he's become chief over astrologers, magicians. Through God's gifts that he's given him, he's able to interpret dreams. He's able to be super smart, and he's able to help out the king who was in this dark spot. What's your reputation, you guys? Whether you're at your school, you're at home, are you maybe the guy that's super cool, or the guy who's known as the funny guy that can make everybody laugh? For guys, are you the guy that girls always like, or are you the girl that the guys always like? Or are you someone that's respected? Are you someone that in the face of trouble they can come to you because they've seen your life and they've seen the wise decisions that you made and be like, "Hey, something's different about that guy. Something's different, and I think he knows something that I don't, and I want to find out." Do you have that reputation like Daniel? Do you have a godly reputation? Reputation is very important, and it can be used for God's kingdom in many incredible ways. What is your reputation? And so we're going to continue in verse 17. Then Daniel answered the king, "You may keep your gifts for yourself and give your rewards to someone else. Nevertheless, I will read the writings of the king and tell him what it means. Your Majesty, the Most High God gave your father Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty and greatness and glory and splendor. Because of the high position he gave him, all nations and peoples of every language dreaded and feared him. Those the king wanted to put to death, he put to death. Those he wanted to spare, he spared. Those he wanted to promote, he promoted. And those he wanted to humble, he humbled. But when his heart became arrogant and hardened with pride, he was disposed of from his royal throne and stripped of his glory." Get this. "He was driven away from people and given the mind of an animal. He lived with wild donkeys and ate grass like the ox. And his body was drenched in the dew of heaven, until he acknowledged that the Most High God is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and sets over them anyone he wishes. But you, Belshazzar, his son, have not humbled yourself, though you knew all of this," everything that he just said about his dad. "Instead, you have set yourself up against God, the Lord in heaven. You had the goblets from the temple brought to you, and you and your nobles, your wives, and your concubines drank wine from them. You praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which cannot see or hear or understand," maybe some of the idols that we put in front of God today in our own lives. Therefore, he sent the hand, but you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life in all your ways. Therefore, he sent the hand that wrote the inscription. And so we have Nebuchadnezzar, someone who wasn't a Christian at first, didn't know God at first, but through Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and a couple other instances, he came to glorify God. He came to know this God, and he worshiped him. And he messed up. He got everything stripped away from him, but ultimately he repented, and his heart was for God, and he got everything back. But then you have, on the opposite spectrum, Belshazzar, who his whole life knew this. He knew what would happen if you disobeyed God. He knew what would happen if you obeyed God. But he still didn't do anything about that. He still didn't take the next step. And for that, God's going to punish him. And so let's read on. This is the inscription that was written. I don't really know how these words say. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin. Thank you, Karis. I don't know. Here's what those words mean. The one that starts with M. God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, the one that starts with a T. You have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. And then Paris, I think, with the P. Your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Then at Belshazzar's command, Daniel was clothed in purple, a gold chain was placed around his neck, and he was proclaimed the third highest ruler in the kingdom. But that very night, Belshazzar, king of the Babylonians, was slain. And Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at age 62. And so we have this crazy story of this guy who was just throwing a big party, who was having a lot of fun with all his friends. And then that very night, he died. He got killed. He got taken over. And so we have this guy who was given all these opportunities, was shown examples of his dad's life on what it looks like to glorify God and what happens if you don't glorify God, but he still didn't do anything about that. And a lot of times I think we're like Belshazzar, where we are given all these opportunities to get to know God more, to get to spend more time with him, or to get to know him for the first time through our friends, through mentors, through leaders, through sermons like these. And yet we ignore God and we ignore all these opportunities. And eventually God's going to let you choose that path, and he's going to say, all right, you can do whatever you want. I've given you all these opportunities to turn to me, but you haven't. Why do we fall into this trap? Why do we fall into this trap of getting all these opportunities but still not following God, still disobeying God even though we're not supposed to? And so we're going to be looking at 3 snares that could be very easy for us to fall into, of knowing about God, knowing we can grow closer to him, but still not doing anything about it. So on your note sheets, we're going to look at the first one. It says we lose perspective. First one is we can lose perspective. That's the first snare. In verse 23, halfway through verse 23, it says, you praised the gods of silver, gold, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which cannot see or hear or understand, but you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life in all your ways. I think sometimes, or a lot of the time, we forget who this God is. We forget how big he is, how mighty he is, and sometimes we forget how small we are. On the lifespan of eternity or even the earth, our life, our 80 years, 70 years that we live here, it says in the Bible, is but a sneeze in eternity. You can just sneeze, and that's how quick your life is over. And yet, in our perspective, we look up and we look at these 7 years and look at these 80 years, and we think we have so much time, but in reality, we don't. What are we doing with that time? And also, I think we forget that without God, how wicked and how nasty we actually are. It says in Isaiah 64:6 that even the good things that we do, not the bad things, but the good things that we do can be compared to dirty rags to God. So if you think you're a good person, you think you're doing all these good things, you think you're close with God because maybe you did a couple good things, you're not. It's compared as dirty rags to God. That's not what is going to get you to heaven. Being a good person is not what's going to get you to heaven. But also, if you flip the coin, we also forget that we are heirs to the God who made everything. We are called sons and daughters of the God who knows us intricately and made us fearfully and wonderfully. That's crazy to think about, that he actually gives us the opportunity to be sons and daughters for him. And so a lot of times we forget those 3 things, and that could stray us away from losing our perspective on God. And we have to constantly remind ourselves of these things. I have to constantly remind myself of these things because I lose perspective very often. The second one is this. We take our gifts for granted. We take our gifts for granted. It says in verse 18, your majesty, the Most High God, gave your father Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty, greatness, glory, and splendor. And so everything that Nebuchadnezzar was, the power that he possessed, how nations feared him, how he was able to put to death anybody he wanted to put to death, was because of God. God gave him that power to be able to do that. But when he disobeyed him, he took all of that away. And that's the same for us, you guys. God has given each and every one of you certain gifts and talents and blessings to be able to enjoy life here on earth, but I also believe he's given it to you so you can further his kingdom here on earth. You can use it for his power and his glory. Take being athletic, for example. How many of you guys are athletic? Maybe you play sports, soccer. Yeah? Me too. I'm an athletic person. Awesome. Well, God gave you that gift. Whether it's playing soccer, maybe you're able to run really well, play basketball. God gave you that specific talent and that influence so you can enjoy life, but also so you can further his kingdom, because you can reach certain people with that gift that other people can't. Your gifts have power and glory. When you're on that soccer team, when you're on that basketball team, you're able to use those gifts to be a light, to show the world what it looks like to be a godly example when you're playing that sport. You have influence and power. God gave you those things for a reason, so use them. Are you using it for God or not? Ultimately, we are on this earth to manage his things. Everything he's given us is his, but we're just on here managing it. So are we managing it his way or your way? The third one is this. We forget there are consequences. We forget there are consequences. A lot of the times, we do something wrong, we mess up, but then there's not immediate consequences. We're like, oh, okay, I'm good. No one caught me. It's fine. I'm good. And so, because there are no immediate consequences, sometimes we forget that there are actually consequences. And when we forget that there are actually consequences, sometimes we don't think we need God anymore. Sometimes we don't need God, or we don't think we need God because we think we're good. We think we're okay. But just because you didn't get caught by maybe your parents or your teacher doesn't mean you're off the hook. God knows every little thing that you do, good or bad, or will do, good or bad. And so what you're ultimately doing is just racking up consequences for yourself, racking up wrath against yourself for when you are judged by God someday. And that is why we have Jesus, though. That is why Jesus came. That's why God sacrificed his own son, so that we don't have to take on that wrath. He put all that wrath that we owe from all the bad things that we've done, and he put it on his son. For those who are Christians, we made that decision. So he endured all our pain and all our wrath so that we may have a chance to be with him in relationship, and so that we didn't have to take on that wrath. And so that shouldn't give you the green light. That information shouldn't give you the green light to go on and just sin and do whatever because you know that you're not going to have wrath someday against God. Because he knows it's a heart thing. He knows that you're truly not for him. But instead of giving that the green light to sin, that should also compel you to lay down your life and live for him, because he first laid down his life and lived for you. And so that should give you that. And so guys, I encourage you to become aware. Take a step back from your life and realize and try to figure out what's blocking you from seeing the opportunities that God's giving you. Where are you not growing closer to God? Or where have you not accepted God into your life? There's a lot of these traps that we fall into constantly, and it's very easy to fall into them. So I encourage you to take a step back and try to figure out what those are. I do it constantly. It's a constantly reminder for me. And so my challenge for you is this. What in my life can I change so I don't fall into the same trap as Belshazzar? I want you guys to figure that out, like I just said, and I want you to tell someone and take action. Tell someone to take action, because it's not going to do anything with this information. Belshazzar had the same information as you, but he didn't do anything with it. So my encourage you is with this information that you have, do something with it. Make a change. Use those talents and abilities to further his kingdom. Realize there are consequences, but God saved you from them. And don't lose perspective. So we're going to pray real quick, and then we're going to do our raffle. Dear Lord, thank you so much for speaking to me. I pray that these guys and girls take away something from this, and that I would take something from this as well. Thank you for using me, using my gifts and abilities to be able to speak to these students. And I pray that they have a great rest of the day. Amen.